Let's talk to a bloke. They call him Harold the Peacock. He's our historian, and he comes up with great yarns. And, well, he says to me here, some people think that times are tough right now, but they were even more so in the Great Depression in the 1930s when family members took one another to court for all sorts of reasons. And he's going to tell us about three of the weirdest. Good morning, Harold the Peacock.
Yeah, good morning, Danny. And these are some very important legal precedents that parents today should definitely learn from.
Well, let's get into it, Harold, and let's get some writs going.
Yeah, that's right. It was back in 1922. There was a very pretty wedding at East Ipswich Methodist Church. Now, the bride was Lily Ballard. She walked down the aisle on the arm of her father, John Ballard. The groom was Ken Harris from Blackstone. But it was 13 years later, in 1935, that this wedding party became embroiled in a legal battle.
Wow.
The father, John, was a carpenter from Basin Pocket, and he sued his son-in-law for £8 and 12 shillings. Wow. You see, he was claiming wages for building a veranda onto their house, as fathers do. John, yeah, well, we all do it, but he was claiming wages, and John's daughter Lily and son Harold, they both gave evidence against their father. The son-in-law won the case, and so the father, John, not only didn't collect his £8 wages, but was a further £3 out of pocket for court expenses.
Yeah.
But you can't just blame the father for trying, because he might have got the idea about making money in court from his son Harold just a few years earlier. You see, that's because in 1932, John was taken to court by his son Harold for having used insulting language in a public place.
Wow, dirty bludger.
Yeah, well, see, young Harold, he was offended because he had been in a dray outside the unemployment office in Brisbane Street when his father made his verbal attack that finished with calling Harold a police pimp.
Now, dirty bludger again. We are filthy about this. Keep going.
Yeah, it's awful, isn't it? And this was just too much for young Harold, and so the case went to the Ipswich court. John was late arriving and got there just in time to hear the magistrate say that he had to pay his son 10 shillings for witness expenses. That was on top of the 30 shillings fine for the offence itself. Meanwhile, the very next year, in 1933, this is out at Warwick, a mother, Mary Abood, sued her daughter Cecilia. The mother was claiming £60 from her daughter for board and lodging from 5 years earlier. But the judge dismissed the case, saying there was no justification for the mother to charge rent. But the mother may have been emboldened by an Ipswich case just a few years earlier in 1929. That's when 20-year-old Garnet Thompson appeared in the Ipswich Police Court to answer the charge of being an idle and disorderly person.
I've worked with a few of them.
Yeah, well, Garnet, he was the youngest of 12 children and lived with his parents, Fred and Margaret Thompson, at Bundamba. And it was his parents, Fred and Margaret, who called the police. You see, they alleged that their son wouldn't do any work and lived off the rest of the family. His parents claimed that they could do nothing with him. And every time they tried to get rid of him, he kept coming back. And you sound familiar? He was rude to his mother, called her filthy names, and when she scolded him, he went outside and threw stones on the roof of the house. So young Garnet was convicted and sentenced, to get this, to 6 months in prison.
Wow. There's a bit different today.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's right.
You can stab people and get away with it.
Yeah, although I should note that young Garnet, although the sticks of gelignite that he had nothing to do with the case, they were confiscated.
Wow.
So Danny, you can see the legal precedent set here. A parent can't claim wages for doing house renos. They can't call their children police pimps in public, can't charge rent, but when it comes to having lazy children around the house, absolutely, that's 6 months in jail.
Wow.
Another great story. He tells them, doesn't he, Pete?
Absolutely.
He knows how to tell a story. Yeah. Here's a storyteller. That's why he's good on radio, because radio's about telling stories and not talking inane crap. How am I going?
You wound up. He's got him wound up. You're doing well there.
Now, historyouthere.com is your website. You get many hits in relation to these stories?
Yeah, I am, and I expect to be, especially with Father's Day coming up in a couple of weeks' time. Fathers everywhere want to know these legal precedents. So, yeah, historyouthere.com.
Now, outthere.com, get on there, historyouthere.com, Harold the H, Ark, Peacock, he's exclusive to West Bremer Radio.